All right, the game is Amoeba Wars. This box cover is really cool. It reminds me of sort of the golden age of sci-fi. In fact, I could easily see this, showing up on one of those old yellow-spined DAW paperbacks from 1975 or 77 or something like that, with some really wacky sci-fi, novel inside. This is really evocative to me of a certain age of science fiction, which I really enjoy. And of course, you've got this giant space amoeba that anyone who's watched Star Trek would be quite familiar with. And Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock run into one of these at one point. And in this game, they are basically the exact same thing as they are in that Star Trek episode. In the box, you get this board, which is pretty ugly. It shows a bunch of different systems. The players will begin on these peripheral systems that have 4 planets to them, and there are 6 of those. This is a 6-player game, or up to 6-player game. Every system has a certain number of planets. Now, despite the fact that some of these look like suns and then the planets around them, they're all considered planets. So this system is a 6-planet system, even though it looks like it's got 5 planets and a sun. Likewise, this blue one here is a 2-planet system, and this one that looks like it's just a star is a 1-planet system. So that's how you count them. That determines the system's innate combat ability. Some systems have these numerical values, which are sort of production values. About half of them have that. There's some 2s around the periphery, some 1s more toward the middle, and then the 2s around the central system of Seastor. This was the seat of the old Imperial Empire that you are trying to re-establish as you come in from the periphery and set yourself up as the Galactic Emperor. These systems inside this yellow border are central systems, and in order for a player to win, he has to conquer Seastor. But he cannot attack Seastor until he holds a certain number of these central systems, and it depends on the number of players. So with 2 or 3 players, you have to hold 5 of these 6 central systems before you can attack Seastor and try to conquer it to win. With 4 players, you need to hold at least 4 of them, and with 5 or 6 players, you need to hold at least 3 of them before you can attack Seastor. So it forces you to kind of spread out and not just make a single beeline, right to the central system. So this is not a, eliminate all your opponents to win kind of a game, although player elimination can happen, I think, or at least virtual elimination can happen. What else is there on the board? There's this time warp over here, which is used for a variant special power. And that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple game. Nothing real earth-shattering here. You also get these power cards, and there's a deck of 50 or so of them. They're all numbered sequentially from 0 up to whatever the highest number is. And on your turn, you're going to play one of these cards, and the next player will play a card, the next player will play a card around the table. Once everyone has played a card, the person who played the highest value card, and they're all, again, there's only 1 of each number, gets to go first. Now, what's unique about this game is that the player who played that highest value card gets to use the ability or the power on his card and the ability and the power on all of the other lower cards in order of their numerical value. So if you played a card number 40 and you were the highest, you'd get to use your card number 40, and you'd also get to use card number 32 and card number 12 and card number 4 and card number 1 or whatever was played that were lower than you. Then you take your turn, then you discard your card. The next highest player will use his card and all lower cards than him, and then take his turn. So the higher the card you play, the more cards you're going to get to use during the turn. So it's very powerful to play a high value card. All of the cards, pretty much all of the cards, are good for the player. In some cases, they require you to conduct amoeba attack campaigns, which may end up not being good for you personally. We'll talk about what those are in a second. But for the most part, the cards are all good, and you want to play the highest value cards you can. You have a hand of 3 cards that you're playing from all game. There are also these special power cards. Now these are given out at the start of the game, and they give each player a special ability that the other players don't have. So it takes what is a very symmetrical, game and makes it at least somewhat asymmetric. And they're not earth-shattering special abilities, but they're all pretty useful. And I don't know that there's necessarily one that's way better than others. They seem to be fairly well balanced. Things like you may place your reinforcements in any friendly system. You have special monitors which can move and attack just like other ships, whereas normally they can't move. You may place your power card down at any time. You don't have to play your power card in order, so you could play it first or probably wait and play it last. Various different special abilities. So you give one of these out to each player at the start of the game, and they have that special ability throughout the entire game. One of the special abilities is if you defeat enemy ships in combat, they don't go back into the player's pool. They go into this time warp thing over here, and the players have to buy them back out in order to be able to build them again. Maybe isn't that useful because there's a pretty decent number of ships in the force pool, but if a player's ships ever start getting low, he may have to then spend extra build points to retrieve his ships from a time warp. So speaking of ships, you've got 6 different colors of spaceships. There are 5 ships ranging from scouts up to monitors, and those ships cost progressively more and have progressively better capabilities in ship-to-ship combat. Then there are the Amoebas, these large gray counters, and also Doomsday machines, these large white counters. The Doomsday machines are kind of like rogue, powerful ships that wander around the galaxy attacking players. The Amoebas are the giant space amoebas from Star Trek, and they will control systems and spread to other systems and attack any players that they find there. So the neat thing about this game is that while the players are certainly not cooperating, they do have to not be constantly beating on each other and spend a little bit of their time and energy keeping the amoeba infestation under control. Or else there's a risk that the amoebas can kind of overspread the galaxy. Although, this game has a sister game that was published maybe a year or two afterwards called Wizard's Quest, and in that game, the game itself has these orcs that attack the players. In that game, I always felt like it's very possible for the orcs to actually defeat the players and wipe them out. I don't really feel like that's possible in this game. The amoebas are a nuisance to be sure, and they can really set a player back if they, attack a lot of his locations and eat a lot of his ships. But you're probably never at risk of actually getting wiped out, or almost wiped out by the amoebas. They're not that powerful, but they're certainly a nuisance. Rules, a typical rule book from that era of Avalon Hill. About 5 pages and then a page of examples. Nothing too earth-shattering here. Simple game. This is not a complicated game. I don't know if they were doing the complexity scale yet. They gave it a rating. Complexity rating 1, with 10 being the most complex. So this is not, this is a Risk-style game. You can teach this to pretty much anybody that's, played something like Risk. They also gave you these, these player aid cards. They have some combat odds on them, a summary of the different types of combat you can have and how you resolve them, and more detailed descriptions of the power cards, in case you forget what they, with just the sort of brief text that's on the actual card itself. The turn order, you use the power cards. So you have the power play phase where everyone plays a card, and then the power cards get used in order. Power cards can do things like give you more ships, allow you a free attack against another player anywhere on the board, move the space amoebas around or provoke them to attack, that type of stuff. Then you produce new ships. Now your production is the numerical value on all the systems that you control. You always have to have a contiguous line back to your home system in order to use the production values of systems that you control. So for example, if you conquered this system here, and then there, and then subsequently lost this system, you would not get to use this production capacity of 2 until you reconnected it to your home base. So you got to keep your home base, and you got to keep your systems and your territory, if you will, connected to your home base. When a player purchases ships, he has to put them in friendly solar systems, that is systems containing already his own ships, and they have to either be his home system or connected to any friendly home system by an unbroken chain. You can place your new ships, all in one place, or you can spread them out among the various, systems that you control. If you lose your home system to another player, you can't build new ships unless you retake somebody's home system, yours or somebody else's. Then you conduct your attacks. Now, attacks basically are you select a system that is adjacent to one of your systems, and then you're going to conduct an attack. Now, depending on what's in the target system, the procedure for resolving the attack changes. So let's just say, for sake of argument, that I've got a few ships here in this system. I'll just throw a few in there. All right, so I have 3 scouts. I have 2, I don't know what these are, cruisers, I think, the next one up. And I have 2 battle stars, which are value 4. Now, what you do in this game is, in order to attack a system that's empty or that contains an amoeba counter, and every system will only have 1 amoeba in it. The amoebas spread from system to system, but only 1 amoeba will ever be in any particular system. So regardless of whether the system is empty or contains an amoeba, the attack value of the player is the number of ships you commit to the battle plus a die roll. It doesn't matter the quality of the ship. So, doing a battle star, which is more powerful, doesn't, it's the same as a scout or as a cruiser or whatever. The most ships you can commit to any one round of combat is 5. So even though in this particular case I have 7 ships in this hex, I can commit only 5 of them to the battle and then throw a die and add the roll of the die to my 5 ships. The value you're trying to defeat is the number of planets in the target system plus a die roll for that system's defense. So in this particular case, it would be 3 plus a die roll, and I've got 5 plus a die roll. Now, if the system is empty and you roll lower and lose, you lose 1 ship. That's all. And you probably take it from your weakest, ship or whatever. If the system contains an amoeba, however, you would lose 2 ships if you lost the dice off. But you can continue to attack. So if I lose a ship, I can add another one here, so I'm back up to 5 and add 5 to my next die roll and attack this thing. And I can continue attacking basically until I'm down to where I don't have enough ships to move a victorious ship into the system. You can't voluntarily leave a system empty. So the only way to lose a system is for an amoeba to eat your ships or another player to take it from you. So eventually, whatever, you conquer the thing and you can move in however many ships you want. It does not, unlike Risk, you don't have to move in a number that you've committed to the fight. You can move in just a single ship if you want, whatever you want to do. Now, if instead of an empty system or a system containing an amoeba, the target system contained an enemy ship or ships, the procedure for combat is a little bit different. So if we had, this was here. Oh, let's not use battle stars. Let's use something else. Let's just keep cruisers there. All right. So if this were the situation, and I wanted to attack green, the quantity of ships doesn't matter so much, it's the quality of them. So what you would do is you would select, if they almost like champions fighting in like feudal times, you put forward a ship, maybe it's this one, and your opponent puts forward a ship, and those 2 ships are going to fight each other. And what you do is you add the number of black dots on the ship to a die roll. So, in this case, the battle star has 3 dots. The cruiser, I think it's a cruiser, has 1 dot. So you would add, yellow would add 3 to his die roll, and green would add 1 to his die roll, and whichever was higher, that guy would win, and the other guy would lose his ship. So let's assume that yellow won, green loses his ship. There's still ships in the system, so yellow could say, I want to make another attack. Green has to put forth another ship to defend himself. And you go on until either yellow loses all his guys or the last green ship is destroyed. And then again, yellow can move in any number of ships into that system. So what the game is trying to sort of encourage you to do is not go for quantity. If you're attacking empty systems or space amoebas, you want quantity. But if you're attacking another player, quality is important. So if I had a bunch of scouts, a single battle star could, wipe out a bunch of my scouts. So the problem with this is I don't think the more powerful ships are quite powerful enough, and I still think it's better to have quantity over quality, generally speaking, in the game. So there's less incentive to build the more powerful ships because, the more powerful ships aren't so much better. So for example, like this one, you add 3 to your die roll, and a scout you would add 0 to your die roll. But the Monitor, or whatever this is, Battlestar costs 4 and the Scout only costs 1. So the calculus of what's worth it to buy, I think, favors lower value ships generally because they're more useful against empty and amoeba infested systems. And yeah, sure, if you're in a combat with another player, you'd like to have a couple of powerful ships, but you know, the lower value ships are generally more valuable to you as a player. So unfortunately, that's kind of how that works. Now, the way that amoebas spread is a little bit unique, and it's all taken care of by the game system. So at the start of the game, you put amoebas in all the central systems, and then you conduct several amoeba attack campaigns. And the way that that works is you roll a die, and you look at all systems containing amoebas. Any system that has a number of planets equal to or lower than that die is going to try to spread. So let's say you rolled a, I don't know, let's say you rolled a 4, right? That would mean that only this system was gonna try to spread because that's the only system that has 4 or fewer planets in it at this particular point in time. If there were more, you would lay out these little chits to determine which order you resolve the attacks in, and they're done kind of randomly. But in this case, we'd have 1. So you select this system by that die roll, and now this amoeba is going to attack. So for this system, you would roll another die, and every adjacent empty system or system with player ships in it that is equal to or lower than that die roll is going to get another amoeba spawned in it. So if you rolled a 4, this system would get an amoeba, this system would get an amoeba, this one would get an amoeba. However, this one's got the player ships in it. So what happens, amoebas always eat 2 ships. So in this case, 2 of this player's ships would be eliminated, the amoeba would die, and 1 player's ships would remain. So you can see that if you don't replenish your ships, the amoebas over the course of several turns and several attack campaigns could whittle you away and eventually, you know, destroy you and take over your system. Again, they're more of a nuisance than anything else. They don't add to the strength of a system on the defense. So if you get a group of guys and attack an amoeba infested system, this is still a 3 plus the die roll. The only detriment is 2 of your ships will be lost in combat against this system if you lose versus 1. But if you win, the amoeba is destroyed and you get to move in just as you normally would. So that's kind of how it works. The amoebas will kind of ebb and flow as the game progresses, as players chip away at them and as then attack campaigns occur. There are cards that have amoeba attack campaigns. There are some cards that say must use. Now this doesn't mean that you have to play it if it's in your hand, but it means that if you play it from your hand, you must do the thing that the card says. Not all, the cards that don't say that are not obligatory, but most of them are so good, like acquire a cruiser, you wouldn't want to not do them. But I guess they're basically just saying that you have an option when it comes around to you to not use a power card that you could use, but the ones that say must use, you have to do those. So in this case, an amoeba attack would occur. And an amoeba attack is, that attack campaign. You can also provoke an amoeba, which means some of the cards allow you to do that, which means you select the amoeba and only that amoeba is going to, try to attack adjacent systems. So the game ebbs and flows, as you, move toward the center and come in contact with your opposing players and fight and, conduct whatever diplomacy or whining you want to conduct. And then eventually somebody, hopefully, gets enough of the central systems and wins. But again, this is one of those games where it's bash the leader. There's nothing to really stop you from bashing the leader except your position and, relative position on the board and how close you are to the leader. So this is one of those games where people will gang up on the person who's perceived to be ahead. And it could last a long time. And eventually someone, hopefully at some point will win. So that's a very quick, brief overview of the rules. Like I said, it is not a complicated game. Oh, one thing I didn't mention. At the end of your turn, you get 1 free move. So you can kind of reorganize your ships among your different systems. So if you ended up with something like this at the end of a turn, you can select 1 system and you can move any number of ships out of that system. You always have to leave 1 into a neighboring system. So that's your free move. So when you're building ships, you want to build them close to your front lines because moving them after the fact is not very easy. You only get 1, move per turn. And the only other way to, quote unquote, move ships is to attack into adjacent systems and conquer them where you can move ships into there. So if you end up with, a pile of ships in your homeworld for some reason and not a lot on your front lines, it may take you several turns of free moves to kind of, send your ships out to where the front is. So when you're building, you obviously want to try to build them, out toward where the action is, which you would probably be doing anyway. There's some special rules for fewer players. Changes the hand size for 2 players, and you discard certain cards depending on the number of players in the game. Not all cards are in play. You're only discarding like maybe 1 or 2 cards depending on the number of players. Like I said, you have a hand of 3 of those power cards. After the power play is completed, everyone draws back up to 3. That's pretty much it. I mean, this is a simple game. They tried to keep it obviously very light and rules light, and it is. It's fairly, thematic in the sense of these amoebas spreading throughout the systems and menacing your ships, and the players maybe having to sort of, conduct a temporary truce to kind of beat back the amoeba infestations. They've given every player, if you want to use it, those special power cards that give you a special ability to keep it a little bit distinct from all the other players and not quite as symmetric. But it's a typical conquer thy neighbor, beer and pretzels style game. It's pretty cool though, and I'll probably play through a few turns so you can see how it goes.